Today we'll talk about specific descriptors that are used in wine that are very specific to certain cultures. And with those descriptors, what we'll try is to locate them or try to convert them, if you like, to the more conventional descriptors. So how do those cultural descriptors correspond to the more normal descriptors that are used in the wine world? So my name is Sietse Wijma. I am from the Netherlands. I have a Master of Science in Sensory Sciences, which is the academic study of flavor perception. I also have my level 4 diploma in wines from the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. I'm based in the Netherlands, but I give courses in different locations worldwide. Now, just of note that this webinar is being recorded. So that means the PowerPoint presentation, my camera and my voice are being included in the recording. Your camera and voice won't be included because it's switched off, but do note that anything that you are using in the chat, that I might read that out loud. If you're posting any questions, I might read them, and that can be included in the recording, okay? So that is just something to be aware of. Now, I've already made a start here with including some very specific descriptors, such as this gentleman from Japan is using the descriptor umeboshi for a wine, which is a type of Japanese pickled plum. And maybe you already have an idea of what the wine could be that he is describing here. So if you have any idea about the grape variety, you could even let us know in the chat and think and share with what you think that might be. Similarly, the descriptor of guava, very specific to a certain white grape variety. If you know what that one is, you can definitely share with us. So we have the descriptor of fenugreek seed here, and that is a tertiary flavor actually. So it's not necessarily connected with a specific grape variety, but it's more associated with a certain wine style. So for this to understand, you have to have a little bit of we'll start with some basic flavor chemistry. And I'll introduce a compound or a molecule to you here, which goes by the name 4-MMP. So this is a sulfur type compound. It's a so-called primary flavor, and you can see the molecular structure over here as well. It's specifically associated with the Sauvignon Blanc grape variety. And this was first discovered by the University of Bordeaux. Pretty important discovery. This was found in 1995. And they analyzed a bunch of white grapes, including Sauvignon Blanc. And that's the only grape variety where they found this compound in. So they didn't find it in Riesling. They didn't find it in Chardonnay, etc. And then you're left with the question, well, what does that smell like? So suppose a molecule like that flies up your nose. What kind of impression does that give? And there's not a straightforward answer to that question. And how I try to find it out is by presenting a wine sample with that compound added. So what I'm doing here, I have that compound in an isolated form, and I'm adding a very small quantity here to this wine glass. Now that wine glass, I then present in a training course. And I ask people two questions. So first, what is it that you're smelling? And then second, where are you from? And it lets us connect backgrounds or cultural background with certain flavor associations. So for this particular Sauvignon Blanc compound, let's see some descriptors. And indeed, it is the passion fruit descriptor that is most common. And passion fruit, well, it is native to South America, but it's pretty widely available around the world. So this is pretty much a globally accepted descriptor. But you also have some descriptors from very specific regions, such as elderflower, which is a type of flower much more commonly grown in cold climates. So you see it lots in the UK and in the Netherlands. And when I ask people from the UK to give some descriptors of this particular compound, I do indeed see the elderflower descriptor being more frequently mentioned than the passion fruit smell. So very much a, well, culturally determined smell. Gooseberry is another descriptor linked with the same compound. Also a berry that you don't really find in many places in the world. Pretty much you find it in the United Kingdom, some other countries where also climate is a bit colder. Now over in East Asia, in Korea, for example, and China, there is a specific seed called the sickle pod seed or the cassia seeds, which is also known by this name, and it is pronounced something like Gyeongmyeongjia. Anyway, you can brew a tea from this. The smell from this tea is very fragrant and exactly like Sauvignon Blanc. Guava, a tropical fruit so that you see in tropical regions. I've run classes like this in the Dominican Republic and Panama, and this is a very popular descriptor for this compound together with the passion fruit descriptor. So just to show a couple of pictures so you have an idea of what these compounds look like, or excuse me, what these ingredients or products look like. You might not have seen any of those before. And from a wine tasting perspective, is it important that you've tried all of these products? I don't think so. One or more of these will generally be sufficient. If you're familiar with that flavor, then that lets you identify Sauvignon Blanc when you're blind tasting, for example. So it's more a case of having one of those aromas that you are strong with, that you are comfortable with. Now, whenever you feel like you want to contribute any descriptors here, please do use the chat. So for example, if there is a certain wine style where you're always picking up a certain descriptor that's highly specific to you, then that is very interesting information for us to learn more. So by all means, at any point you can contribute. Moving on to another Sauvignon Blanc flavor, which belongs to the class of pyrazines. Pretty long chemical name. Anyway, this is also primary flavor, not only found in Sauvignon Blanc, but also some other grape varieties, including Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Carmenère. And if you feel like maybe I'm rushing through the origins of these aromas, I go into much more depth in some of my other courses. But for now, let's just see what the descriptors are. And the most common descriptor here is green bell pepper. Indeed, most people will have tried that, but it's not an ingredient that is mega popular in all cuisines. So there are some alternative descriptors. And this particular root, ginseng, which is used in South Korea, it's used in China, it's used in some other Asian countries. It is a specific root with some culinary applications, as well as some medicinal properties. And so credit, by the way, to the sensory scientist, French sensory scientist, Gabriel Lepousse, who identified this descriptor for this particular compound. And I've tried ginseng, and I cannot argue about it. It does indeed remind me of Cabernet Sauvignon and related varieties. Now, this is a plant which is called blackjack, and I was speaking to a sommelier called Tinashe. He's actually from Zimbabwe, but he lives in South Africa. This particular aroma always reminds him of this plant blackjack, which is known as Venus pilosa. Let's just jump to the next slide so you can have a look at what that looks like. So this particular plant, apparently it has some sticky properties as well. So what Tinashe said, he always used, when he was a kid, he was threw the plants at his friends, and it would like stick to their clothes. Anyway, very fragrant as well. It's a bit of a weed, so a bit of invasive plant actually, but very, very reminiscent of Sauvignon Blanc. This is what the ginseng root looks like, green bell pepper. There's some various sauces that are also useful descriptors for Sauvignon Blanc related varieties. So this is a type of red pepper sauce, ajika, which you see in Georgia, you see it in Turkey, for example. This is not a Korean product, gochujang, which, excuse me for my pronunciation. Anyway, this is also a product which has that pepper aroma to it. Now, so far, you might ask yourself, well, these molecules, are these indeed found in all of these products? So this particular pyrazine, is that present in something like blackjack or in ginseng? And Well, for a start, we do know that it's identified in wine a lot. If we look at blackjack specifically, so that plant, and if you go to a scientific database and you look up blackjack and then its volatile compounds, such as this pyrazine, you're not going to find any results. And the reason for this is chemical analysis is pretty expensive to carry out. So you need a pretty good reason to do it. With something like wine is an incredibly valuable product commercially, so that's definitely a good reason to carry out the chemical analysis, and there's plenty of research being carried out on wine in specific. With a plant like blackjack, it is super niche, and people are not really that bothered about what its exact aromatic composition is. So for that reason, we don't know. If you look at something like bell pepper, and you look in a database, you will get more than 100 results. So there's lots of studies dedicated to the aromatic composition of bell pepper, which is indeed a very, very commercially valuable crop. So it makes sense that there's some scientific research dedicated into that. So long story short, with those particular products, sometimes we indeed have confirmation that that molecule exists in those specific products. Sometimes we don't know, and then it's likely a related compound, and in reality it doesn't matter that much. If you find that this is a descriptor like ginseng that you find useful for identifying certain wine aromas, then you can use that descriptor. And it would be nice to know if there was a compound found in that product, but in reality you could just use it as a descriptor in wine tasting. Moving on to a compound called geraniol, beautiful name, which was first identified in geranium grass, and that's how it gets its name from. Often with those particular compounds, they have a historic name. So it tells you in which thing it was first identified in, not necessarily what it smells like. It belongs to the class of terpenes. So a class is like a molecular family. It's a primary flavor, is found in Muscat, in several other varieties, including Gewürztraminer, and you find it in lower levels in varieties like Viognier and Riesling as well. So let's find out what it smells like. And rose is by far the most commonly used descriptor for geraniol. Rose and rose water is frequently used around the world, but I've interviewed a Japanese taster, and this compound always reminds him of something called umeboshi, which is a type of pickled plum, popularly consumed in Japan. Over in China, so a Chinese taster told him that geraniol reminds him of rice vinegar. Rice vinegar, there's different types of that, and it's just not just found in China, right? And you have different styles of rice vinegar. I don't know if all of them are as floral as this, but definitely useful descriptor. Turkish Delight, often flavored with these floral type of flavors, right? Rose, violet. They come in different flavors. They can also have fruity flavors, for example, but this is certainly a useful descriptor for geraniol. Geraniol also has a citrusy aspect, but in an aromatic sense. It's more like the peel of the citrus fruit, okay? And bergamot is one of those descriptors that is popular in Italy among Italian wine tasters. And the vast majority of the production of bergamot orange is located in Italy. And bergamot liqueurs are also frequent associations with Muscat and related varieties. Similarly, I've heard tasters from Italy use the term limoncello for describing geraniol, so perfect identification for those aromatic style varieties. Bergamot is also used as a flavoring in Earl Grey tea, consumed in the United Kingdom, but also in other places. So some people that are not necessarily familiar with the aroma of bergamot might use the term Earl Grey more frequently. And you will see that some of those terms are a bit more closely related, such as Earl Grey and bergamot, and rose and Turkish Delight are also closely related. But something like bergamot and rose, maybe it doesn't immediately, you won't immediately think of them as being the same. So, and I think that's a fair comment. And I'll use this slide to illustrate what's going on. So they both contain the compound geraniol, but they have many different other aroma compounds present there, okay? Normal smells that you get in daily life are not just a single compound. They're always a combination of compounds. So the additional, so like what you could call like the secondary or the supplementary aromas that are found in rose, like farnesol, carvone, etc., they will make it that a rose smells different from a bergamot. And bergamot has some unique compounds that are not found in rose. And importantly, wine never smells exactly like rose, right? So it is just going to be this compound that is relevant for wine, and all the other wines, they don't really play an important role in wine. So that explains why wine doesn't smell exactly like rose flowers, but there's just a similarity, right? A bit of a similarity, and that is due to that compound geraniol. So here's what some of these things look like that I've just described. And in case you were wondering if I'm sharing this presentation as well, it should be somewhere in the notes, but at the end of the presentation, I'll share the link again, so just so you can access it easily. Isoamyl acetate is a compound belonging to the class of esters. This is formed in a process called carbonic maceration. So it's linked with certain red wine styles. And in white wines, you can also find it, especially when wines are fermented at a lower temperature. So if you're fermenting at very cool temperatures, like 12 degrees Celsius, you're going to get higher levels of isoamyl acetate. And those esters often have those fruity aromas, but a bit of an artificial way, if that makes sense. And the primary descriptor here is banana, but you get it in so many different types. And I don't even know where to start. This is a long list, right? But there are so many different brands of confectionery that use isoamyl acetate as a flavoring. And depending on where you are in the world, you have likely seen one of those names before, or it means nothing to you. But all of these, I would argue, are fine descriptors for something like a Beaujolais, which is made with carbonic maceration. And the way that we are taught wine tasting is usually a bit, what I would say, English focused. So let me give you an example of that. I think many of you will have seen this before. This is the systematic approaching from the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. And indeed, pear drop is also one of those descriptors that appears on the list here. And indeed, this is a type of confectionery that is flavored with isoamyl acetate and kind of has that banana-like synthetic banana aroma. And in my opinion, it is a little bit unfair to use a descriptor like that, which only means something for people that have grown up in the UK for an organization that aims to teach wine tasting worldwide. Now, don't get me wrong, I think in general, this systematic approach to tasting is very useful, and there's some great terms here that are super useful. For example, lychee, very useful for Gewürztraminer. You have passion fruit for Sauvignon Blanc, right? So I think a lot of these make perfect sense, but some of these are just not descriptors that are that friendly, I think, for the global population, if that makes sense. So let's move on here. You've seen that I've not listed every country here with the descriptors. So maybe you've asked, well, what about Peru? Or what about Egypt? Or why haven't you mentioned the Philippines, for example? Well, the simple answer to that is that I have not been to every part of the world. And I'm relying on people that participate in my courses that give descriptors. So if you feel like you've been left out because your country is missing, it's not that I think that your country is less important. It's just that I have not yet had the chance to interview anyone from that region. Okay, so sorry about that, but hopefully in the years to come, I will continue to collect data and I can give a more, even more elaborate description of certain compounds. Acetaldehyde is an aroma compound which has two origins. It's formed by yeast during fermentation, and it's also an oxidation product. So whenever wine is exposed to air, you'll get lots of this. The wine styles where you might see this in is, for example, Fino Sherry, which is made using a particular type of yeast known as flor, makes very, very high levels of acetaldehyde. Now, once again, interesting range of descriptors, and the convention, like the consensus descriptor here is bruised apple. So whenever apple is like dropped and develop brown spots, etc., it gets this acetaldehyde smell, and that is how I use it in my courses. But let's have a look at some alternative descriptors. Bean sprouts, I think, is a great descriptor here. Very much those fresh fresh bean sprouts. Over in Turkey, somebody said that it very much smells like green chickpeas. So the fresh ones, not from a can. Papaya is a type of fruit that you get in various places around the world, but especially if it's slightly underripe, it gets this acetaldehyde aroma. Pumpkin, especially if you have a raw pumpkin, a squash, and you slice it in through half, you smell the inside, very much has the same smell. And then underripe avocado is another way of looking at the same aroma. So marula is the final one. This is a pretty niche fruit that you see in South Africa, also shared with me with the sommelier Tinashe. And if I just put all of these side by side, this is what they look like. And I think you can see some overlap. Some of those descriptors are very much like towards bruising, rotting, fermenting, like this. So that is one aspect of the smell. And then there's also like a green aspect, like green chickpeas, bean sprouts, like raw pumpkin. It's like kind of underripe and overripe at the same time, if that makes sense. So therefore, I think that explains why it can remind us of so many different things. It's just the process of like either overripe or underripe fruits. And this is an amazing picture, I think, which is a nice analogy to aroma compounds. This is what is called an ambiguous picture. So there's two ways that you can look at it. It's either a duck or it's a rabbit, right? So this could be like the beak of the duck, but it could also be the ears of the rabbit, and then this could be the mouth of the rabbit, if you like. And I'm using this analogy because aroma compounds are pretty much the same. They have no predefined smell. It's just going to smell like whatever it is that you're most familiar with. And for example, if with those examples, if you know about two or more, then if you smell acetaldehyde, it can remind you of two things. So it can, and just like how this picture can remind you of two things at the same time. Diacetyl is a compound formed during malolactic fermentation. This is a stage in the production of wine where we're using bacteria, the lactic acid bacteria, to convert malic acid into lactic acid. And then diacetyl is a byproduct of that, which is responsible for the classic aroma that we associate with malolactic fermentation. And the key descriptor for that is butter. And butter is a pretty popular product around the world. But and the reason for that is, like, especially historically, butter used to be prepared using lactic acid bacteria, but they don't just play a role in butter. Okay, it can ferment other dairy products as well. Baklava, great descriptor, of course, is one of those treats that are used with butter, so that does make some sense. But here's the descriptor dahi, which is a type of yogurt which is often made at home in India and made using the same culture, so lactic acid bacteria they will produce tons of diacetyl. Interestingly, when rice is spoiled, so when you leave it at room temperature for a few days, you will also get growth of lactic acid bacteria producing the same compound. So once again, depending on what you've grown up with or what aroma is freshest in your memory, that is what you're going to think of when you're smelling diacetyl, when you're smelling a Chardonnay which has gone through malolactic fermentation, for example. This is my education partner in Turkey who showed me the baklava descriptor. So this is what some of these products look like if you have not seen them before. Sotalon, an oxidation type compound. So it's found in oxidative wine styles, including Oloroso sherry, Madeira, and tawny port. Brown sugar is what most people associate it with, and that is the go-to descriptor here. But as before, there's no one-size-fits-all descriptor. So here are some other ones, and indeed, in Canada, they will typically use the maple syrup descriptor when they are smelling this compound. And you can see a similarity. There's that sort of sweetness, syrupy aspect. I hear molasses from time to time as well. Personally, we make syrup out of sugar beets here in the Netherlands, and that type of syrup is what I always smell when I'm either detecting Sotalon in isolation during my courses, or when I'm trying an Oloroso sherry. It's just sugar beet syrup for me. Fenugreek seeds. Now there is a spicy element to this smell as well, and very popularly used in India, also in other places in the world. Fenugreek seeds is also an ingredient of curry powder. So that is another association with this smell in particular. Fenugreek seed is also used in a spice rub called chemin, which is used in a dish called pastirma. So you have my justification if you want to describe Oloroso sherry as having a chemin aroma. There's a savory element as well to this smell, and soy sauce remains the descriptor of choice when I'm showing this compound to Chinese wine tasters. So just a demonstration. This is what some of these things look like in case you haven't seen them before. And this is actually a picture of pastirma on the bottom right. So it's the rub around here which contains that spice mixture, including fenugreek seeds. And producers of products are very well aware of effects like this. And indeed, maple syrup, for example, is a pretty expensive product. Sometimes imitation type products are being made, and they are often based on fenugreek seeds that extract the aroma from that. They use that aroma to imitate maple syrup. I think a pretty clever way, and they're showing that they're well aware of that compound sotalon that exists in both products. Here is some more data that I think I had just in case we had some extra time, and we have 2 minutes left. So why not just blast through these descriptors while we can? Rotendone is a compound found in Syrah, particularly when those Syrah grapes are grown in cool or moderate climates. Black pepper, but there are some people who are like, I'm not getting any black pepper, I'm more getting a woody aspect like sandalwood. And similarly, agarwood or cedarwood are some associations I hear from time to time with Syrah. Lind is the descriptor for heather in Iceland, so that's what I recently found out as well, that that Rotendone contains. This is a particularly niche fault, the ladybird taint, that only happened in a couple of vintages. That's basically when ladybird beetles are present in a vineyard and they're being harvested along the fruit, harvested along the grapes. They are then giving off this particular off flavor when they are being included in a grape crush. Very much an earthy flavor like potato skins, but I've also heard tahini, which is a sesame paste, cucumber skin, and more specifically the rind of cheddar cheese. Whiskey lactone present in American oak, often described as coconut, but it is also present in dill, and dill pickles are really, really popular in the United States. And I hear that descriptor all the time when people are trying this compound. This is a fault known as reduction, which is linked to stressed yeast, so some problems during fermentation, giving these rotten vegetables smells, but also reminiscent of stinky cheese. And those from France will know what camembert smells like, and very much has that camembert smell. But it's also reminiscent of some fermented products, including kimchi. Okay, that brings us to a wrap up. Well, we've gone through so many different weird descriptors. The PowerPoint slides, I put them in the chat, and they are pinned just in case you cannot access them because you've joined in later. I'll put them here one more time. So you should be able to click that and download the slides if you are interested in those. My email address is also here if you want to contact me for whatever reason. If you have more questions, always happy to answer them. I have an Instagram channel where I make educative videos and posts. On my website, you will find my full event schedule if you're interested in participating in in-person events. I also have a web shop where I am selling the compounds if you're interested in using your own compounds and making flavor additions and you're interested in what they smell like. I have a YouTube channel, and hopefully one of these days I will upload the recording of this webinar to my YouTube channel, and then you can rewatch it or you can share it with people. I will stick around for a couple more minutes, try to answer any questions that pop up. Other than that, thank you so much for joining in today and participating in this session. Really value it. Cheers.